Welcome, and be at ease. Tonight, the story is the Ramayana, the tale of Rama and Sita, one of the oldest stories the world still tells, given here slowly and softly for sleep. There is nothing to follow closely and nothing to remember. The story will carry itself, and it will still be here if you drift away, and it will still be here tomorrow. If these stories help you rest, subscribing tells me to make more of them. The Ramayana has been sung for thousands of years, in 1,000 ways, in 1,000 tongues. Tonight we follow the oldest of the tellings, the poet Valmiki's, as one telling has it. So settle deeper into the dark, and let the lamps be lit far away, in a city by a river, in the time before time. In the north of the old land, where the plains lie wide beneath the slow wheel of the stars, there flowed a river called the Sarayu, and on her banks stood a city named Ayodhya, which means the city no enemy could take. The story tells us that Ayodhya was long in the building and lovely in the finishing, with streets laid straight and watered against the dust, with gardens where mango and ashoka trees leaned together, and with white towers that held the last light of evening long after the fields had gone grey. Travelers who came up the road at dusk would stop when they saw her walls, and stand a while in silence, and go on more gently than before. The river passed the city the way sleep passes over a tired mind, without hurry, without end. In that city there ruled a king named Dasharatha, lord of Kosala, a king rich in horses and elephants, rich in granaries and friends, rich in years of peace. His people did not lock their doors, the story says, for there was little to fear and less to envy, and in the evenings the smoke of 10,000 cooking fires rose straight into the quiet air. Dasharatha had ministers who were wise and truthful, and priests who were learned and mild, and among them was Vasishta, a sage of the old line, whose counsel was like deep water. Whatever a kingdom may hold, that kingdom held it. The king wanted for nothing that can be counted. And yet there was one gift the years had not brought him, and it was the one gift the heart cannot argue itself out of wanting. Dasharatha had no son. He had 3 queens, whom he loved in 3 ways, as men love who have grown old in kindness. Kausalya was the eldest, patient and grave, a queen the people bowed to gladly. Kaikeyi was the youngest in spirit, bright as a struck bell, the daughter of a mountain king, and it was she who had once driven the king's chariot in battle and saved his life, and been promised for that saving 2 boons of her choosing whenever she should ask. Sumitra was the quiet one, who watched and understood and said little. 3 queens, and the palace full of lamplight and music, and no child's voice anywhere in it. In the long evenings the king would walk on his terraces above the Sarayu, and the river would go on without him, and he would feel the weight of an empty future, the way one feels rain coming before it falls. So the king resolved, in the ripeness of his years, to hold the great fire rite, the yajna, the asking made with flame, as kings had done in the old days when their need was past the help of counsel. Word went out along the roads. Sages came from their forest hermitages, with their hair bound up and their water pots in their hands. And kings came from friendly lands with gifts. And the bank of the Sarayu north of the city was made smooth and holy. For a year the preparations went forward, unhurried, for holy things are not hastened. And when at last the fires were kindled, they were fed with butter and with song, and the smoke went up in a single grey pillar into the windless sky. The priests chanted in the old meters, verse after verse, hour after hour, the way the river ran, the way the stars turned. It is said the gods themselves drew near to listen, invisible in the upper air, the way memories draw near a person falling asleep. And out of the heart of the fire, the story tells us, there rose a shining being, dark as rain cloud and dressed in red, bearing in his 2 hands a wide golden vessel, covered with a silver lid, and warm as if it had been carried a long way. In the vessel was payasa, sweet rice cooked in milk, and the being spoke to the king in a voice like the fire settling, and said that the gods were pleased, and that the queens who drank of this would bear the sons he longed for. Then he was gone, the way flame is gone when the lamp is lowered, and the king stood holding the warm gold, and his eyes were full of tears, and the tears were easy ones. He carried the vessel to his queens with his own hands. To Kausalya he gave a share, and to Sumitra a share, and to Kaikeyi a share, and to Kaikeyi, the quiet one, a second share also. And the 4 portions were drunk, and the palace slept that night like a field after harvest. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. The seasons turned as they do, slow and sure, and in their turning the queens grew great with child, and the city grew soft with waiting. And in the spring, when the month was Chaitra, and the moon stood in the house of rebirth, Kausalya bore a son. He came into the world without a cry, the story says, calm from his first breath, and his skin was dusky like the blue hour after sunset, and his eyes were long and quiet. They named him Rama, a name that was old even then, a name that means the one in whom others find rest. Those who tell the story say the gods knew on that night what the king did not, and that the upper air was crowded with rejoicing no mortal ear could hear. In the palace there was only a newborn child, and a tired queen sleeping, and an old king standing at the door of the birth chamber with his hand over his mouth. And Kaikeyi bore a son, and he was named Bharata, a child generous from the cradle, who would one day refuse a throne out of love, though no one knew it yet. And Sumitra, who had drunk 2 shares, bore 2 sons together, and they were named Lakshmana and Shatrughna, 4 sons in one season, where for so long there had been none. The city gave itself to gladness, the way dry ground gives itself to the first rain. Drums were sounded in the streets, and then, toward evening, softened, for the queens were sleeping, and sweets were carried door to door, and prisoners were pardoned, and the temple bells rang slow and even into the night, and no one wished the ringing shorter. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. The boys grew as trees grow, imperceptibly, and then unmistakably. They learned their letters and their verses. They learned the bow and the horse. They learned when to speak and when to be silent, and each learned it in his own way. Bharata was open-handed, Shatrughna was steadfast, and Lakshmana from the very first belonged to Rama. Where Rama went, Lakshmana followed, half a step behind and half a thought ahead. And if Rama was given a sweet, he would not taste it until his brother held its equal. As for Rama, the story lingers on him the way lamplight lingers on gold. He was strong past his years and gentle past his strength. He spoke first to whoever greeted him, remembered every kindness, and forgot every slight. Servants loved him because he knew their names, and elders loved him because he asked their blessing, and the city loved him because loving him felt like resting. In the evenings, when their lessons were done, Rama and Lakshmana would take their small wooden bows into the mango gardens and shoot at rings of woven grass until the light failed, and then lie in the cool grass naming the stars as they arrived, first one, then a scattering, then beyond all counting. Below the garden walls, the Sarayu went on toward the sea, carrying the day's last light upon her back. From the terraces came the smell of the evening meal, and a mother's voice calling, unhurried, knowing the boys would come. This was the world Rama was given first, a world at peace, a city that trusted its king, a family woven close. Whatever roads lay ahead of him, and they were long, this was the place his heart would always mean when it said the word home. Night settled over Ayodhya, the way it had settled for 100 years, quarter by quarter, street by street. The potters banked their kilns, and the weavers covered their looms, and the temple lamps were trimmed low. On the palace terraces the watchmen leaned on their spears and spoke in murmurs, out of habit, for there was nothing to guard against but the dark itself. One by one the windows of the great houses dimmed, and one by one the palace lamps were put out, in the long corridors, in the halls of music, in the chambers of the sleeping queens, until at last a single lamp remained, burning small and steady beside the cradles of the 4 princes, and then a nurse's hand lowered even that one, and the city by the Sarayu slept. You will remember the city of Ayodhya, at rest beside her river, and the 4 princes sleeping in the house of Dasharatha, the king who had waited so long for their voices. The story now moves as the seasons moved, gently forward, to a morning some 16 years on, when the princes had grown into young men, and a visitor stood at the city gate whose coming would change everything, though the morning itself was as calm as any other. He was a sage, tall and spare, with the bearing of a man who had once commanded armies, for so he had. His name was Vishvamitra, the sage who had once been a king, who had laid down a kingdom the way other men lay down a burden, and had won by long austerity a place among the holiest of the holy. When such a man comes walking out of the forest with his staff and his water pot, kings rise from their thrones. And Dasharatha rose gladly, and washed the sage's feet with his own hands, and asked what gift a grateful king might give. "Ask anything," the old king said, in the largeness of his heart, "and it is yours." Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. Then Vishwamitra spoke, and his voice was even, and what he asked for was Rama. In the deep forest, he said, He and his brother hermits were keeping a great rite, a yagna of many seasons, and creatures of the night had taken to spoiling it, scattering the fires and defiling the altars, led by a demoness of long dread, whose name was Tataka. Weapons of the ordinary kind were no use against such beings, and holy men might not strike in anger while keeping holy vows. "Give me Rama," said the sage, "for 10 nights, that he may guard the right." The words were few, and the silence after them was long. Grief took the old king by the throat, for Rama was the breath of his body, and the forest was the forest. He offered himself instead, offered his armies, offered anything that was not this one thing, and his voice failed him. But Vasishta, a sage of the old line, whose counsel was like deep water, leaned near and reminded the king quietly that a promise given by a king of the house of Ikshvaku was not a coin to be taken back, and that a boy in the keeping of Vishvamitra was safer than a boy behind any wall in the world. And so the king consented, as the wise consent to the turning of a wheel they cannot hold. Rama was sent for, and came, and hearing what was asked, was glad. And Lakshmana, Sumitra's son, the brother who was his shadow, would not be left behind. The blessing was given with unsteady hands. The 2 princes walked out of the southern gate behind the tall old sage, each with his bow, and the city watched them to the tree line. The road was a teacher, and the sage let it teach. They walked the first day along the Sarayu, among pastures and shrines, and slept that night on grass beds by the water. And the story pauses there, on the 2 princes sleeping under the open sky for the first time in their lives, while the sage sat wakeful and content beside them, like a banked fire. In the days that followed, Vishwamitra gave to Rama, verse by verse, in the cool of the mornings, certain mantras of the old time, Bala and Atibala by name, words of power that keep hunger and weariness from a traveler. And after them, in slow procession, the knowledge of the great celestial weapons, which are not things of iron at all, but forms of focused will, given only to the worthy, and sleeping in the mind until called. Rama received them the way still water receives the moon. Lakshmana watched and learned his own share, and was proud of his brother past all telling. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. They came in time to a forest that had gone wrong, a country of black thorn and silence where no bird spoke, and this was Tataka's wood. The story does not linger here, and neither shall we. There was a fight in that dark country, brief and final. Rama, who had never yet raised his hand against any living being, hesitated at the last, for the demoness had been a woman once, and a mother, and something in him resisted, until Vishwamitra spoke a word of law and mercy together, that protecting the innocent is the first duty, and the arrow went, one arrow only, and the long dread was over. That is all the story needs of it. What matters is what came after, which is that the forest itself seemed to breathe again, and streams remembered their voices, and green returned across that country, the way color returns to a face, and the sage laid his hand on Rama's head in blessing. Then, for 10 days and nights, the princes kept watch over the rite, while the hermits chanted, and the fires burned tall and clean. On the last night, the spoilers came, as the sage had said they would, sons of darkness riding a black wind, and were met and were scattered. 2 of them flung far out over the southern sea by the wind of Rama's arrows, and the 3rd fleeing beyond all maps, and the rite was completed in stillness at dawn. The hermits came out of their trance slowly, blinking at the ordinary miracle of morning, and blessed the brothers with full hearts. The forest fell back asleep around them all, safely this time, the way a household sleeps when the storm has passed the roof and gone. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. Their duty done, the princes might have turned home, but Vishwamitra looked north and east, toward the country of Videha, and said only that in the city of Mithila a great king was holding a rite of his own, and that there was a thing in his keeping worth walking far to see, an ancient bow, the Bow of Shiva himself, which no man living had ever strung. Roads once begun have their own intentions. They walked on through pleasant lands, and the sage told them stories as they went, of every river they forded and every hill they rounded. For to the old ones the whole earth was made of stories, and walking through it was a kind of reading. And on that road there stood a hermitage that seemed asleep past all waking, with its gate fallen and its courtyard drifted with leaves. And in the courtyard a shape of stone, that had the softness of a woman's form, as if a sculptor had caught her mid-turning. Here the sage's voice grew gentle. This, he said, was Ahalya, wife of the sage Gautama, made in the old days the most beautiful of women. Long ago a god had deceived her, wearing her husband's face, and Gautama, in the fury of his grief, had cursed them both, and the curse had fallen on her like winter, stilling her to stone, until a certain foot should cross that threshold. The story does not weigh her fault against her fate. It says only that Rama came into that ruined courtyard, and bowed to the stone as to an elder, and the dust of his foot touched it. And the stone remembered that it was a woman. Warmth moved through it the way dawn moves through a cold field, and Ahalya rose, blinking in the light of the world, made new and made free, and the first thing she saw was a young man bowing to her with joined hands, asking her blessing. Gautama returned in that hour, his long anger long since burned to ash, and husband and wife were reconciled in the quiet way of old people, without many words. They honored Rama not as a boy, but as a grace that had come walking into their ruin, and Rama took the dust of their feet, and would hear no praise. The hermitage that evening was swept, and lit, and loud with birds. Kindness, the story tells us here, is stronger than judgment, and grace does not ask how long the stone has been stone. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. They slept that night as guests of the reconciled, and walked on with the morning, and now the road ran broad and easy through the ripening fields of Videha, among wells and cattle and the smoke of villages, everything ordinary and everything good. Toward evening of the last day, they saw far off the towers of Mithila, rose-colored in the failing light, and the sage smiled to himself the way old men smile who can see a little way into tomorrow. The princes walked easily, talking low of small things, the bow, the road, the supper they hoped for. Behind them the sun went down into the country they had mended. Ahead, one by one, across the darkening plain, the lamps of Mithila were being lit, and somewhere among those lamps, though no one had yet said her name, a king's daughter was watering the evening jasmine, and the story was quietly gathering, as rivers gather, toward the meeting it had wanted all along. You will remember how Rama and Lakshmana came walking out of the mended forest behind the sage Vishwamitra, and how the lamps of Mithila were being lit across the plain as they arrived. Mithila was the city of King Janaka, and Janaka was a king unlike other kings, for he ruled well and held it all lightly, a philosopher king, a man who could sit among sages discussing the nature of the self, and then rise and judge a dispute about a boundary stone with perfect patience. His city took after him. It was busy without noise and rich without display, and scholars came to it from every quarter as bees come to a garden. The story pauses here to tell how this king came by his daughter, for she did not come to him as other children come. One spring, in the time of the plowing rite, Janaka himself drove the golden plow across the sacred field, as the kings of Videha did to bless the seed, and the earth opened in a long dark furrow behind him, and in the furrow, cradled as if the ground itself had made a bed for her, there lay an infant girl. She was lifted up with wonder and carried home with joy. And because the furrow is called Sita in the old tongue, that was the name she was given, Sita, the earth's own child. The king loved her past all telling, and the queen loved her, and she grew up in that city of scholars with a mind like clear water, and a heart that had folded within it the patience of the ground in winter, though no one yet knew how deeply she would need it. Vaidehi they called her also, the daughter of Videha, and Janaki, Janaka's girl. Now, in the treasury of Mithila, there was kept an ancient thing, a bow, but to call it a bow is to call a mountain a stone. It had belonged, the story tells us, to Shiva himself, the great god, the lord of stillness, and had been left in the keeping of Janakazine ages before. It lay in a long iron case upon 8 pairs of wheels, and strong men by the 100 were needed to draw it into the hall, and no man living had ever strung it. Kings had come from every direction to try, proud kings, famous kings, and each had put his hands to the cold curve of it, and strained until his sight went dark, and the bow had not so much as stirred. And Janaka, watching his daughter grow, had made a quiet vow that only the man who could bend that bow would be given Sita, for he would give the earth's own child to no one less. To this city, then, and to this king, came Vishwamitra with the 2 princes, and they were welcomed with honor, for the sage's name opened every door. And when the greetings were done, Vishwamitra said simply that these sons of Dasharatha wished to see the bow of Shiva. Janaka looked at the two young men, at their travel-worn feet and their calm faces, and something in him grew very still, the way the air grows still before rain that is longed for. He gave the order. The great case came groaning into the hall on its many wheels, drawn by ranks of men, and was opened, and the bow lay shining in its bed of oil and silk, vast, dark, beautiful, older than the kingdom, older than the river, a sleeping strength from the first days of the world. Rama rose and asked leave of the sage and of the king, and walked to the bow the way he walked everywhere, without hurry and without doubt. He looked at it a long moment, as one looks at a sleeping elder before waking them. Then he laid his hand upon the great curve, and lifted it from its bed as easily as a man lifts a garland from a hook. And the hall went utterly silent, hundreds of breaths held as one. He set the foot of the bow to the ground, and bent it, and strung it, all in one slow motion, like a wave gathering, and then, testing, he drew the string toward his ear. And the bow, which had slept since the first days of the world, and would not wake for any king, woke for Rama, and finding itself bent past its old age's strength, it broke. With a sound the story compares to the sky itself clearing its throat, a single vast crack that rolled out over the city and the fields, and was heard, they say, 3 days' journey away, and then was gone, leaving a silence bright as morning. In that silence Sita came into the hall with a garland of white flowers in her 2 hands. She had been told what the sound had meant. The story does not report that either of them spoke, and perhaps neither of them needed to, for there are meetings that are also recognitions, as if 2 rivers, long parallel, had always known they would join. She raised the garland, and Rama bent his head to receive it, and the hall, which had held its breath so long, let it out in one great glad sigh, and the conches sounded, and Mithila began, in that hour, to hang out her wedding silks. Messengers went to Ayodhya on the fastest horses, and old Dasharatha came with his queens and his court and his priests, weeping the easy tears of glad old men. And the 2 kings met like brothers. And the joy widened, as joy will, for Janaka had a second daughter, Urmila, and his brother had 2 daughters more, Mandavi and Shrutakirti. And it was settled among the elders with much smiling that 4 weddings would be held under one canopy. To Rama Sita, to Lakshmana Urmila, to Bharata Mandavi, and to Shatrughna Shrutakirti. The city gave itself over to preparation, and the story lets us rest a while in the pleasure of it. The courtyards washed with rose water, the mountains of marigold and jasmine, the sweet smoke of the cooking fires burning day and night, the musicians tuning in the porches, the aunts arriving. The weddings were held when the moon stood fair. Around the sacred fire in the old way, the four couples walked their slow circles, while the priests sang the verses that have joined hands for 100 generations. And Janaka gave his daughters with words that are still spoken at weddings. And the fire received the offerings, and the night received the fire's smoke. And somewhere above the canopy, the gods, the story says, let fall a quiet rain of flowers. Sita's hand was placed in Rama's hand. Water was poured over their joined fingers, and the thing was done that all the rest of the story will test and prove. They were young, and they were solemn, and they were shining. It is one of the good nights of the world, and the telling is glad to linger in it. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. The road home was a bridal procession, slow, with laden elephants and music. And on that road, the story tells us, the sky darkened once, and there came striding to meet them a figure out of an older age, Parashurama, the hermit warrior, Rama of the axe, who had once emptied the earth of tyrants, and whose anger was a legend nurses used to quiet children. He had heard the breaking of Shiva's bow, and he came burning with challenge, carrying a second bow, the bow of Vishnu. And he demanded that this young prince prove the deed was no accident. The old king trembled. Rama did not. He took the offered bow with a bow of his head, and strung it and drew it in the same unhurried way. And the fire went out of Parashurama like a lamp at dawn. He looked long at the young man, and what he saw we are not told, only that he bowed in his turn, blessed the marriage, and walked away into the hills to lay his old wars down. The clouds opened, and the procession went on in sunlight. So Ayodhya received her 4 princes and their 4 brides, with lamps in every window and songs from every roof. And Dasharatha moved through the celebrations like a man whose cup runs over, and who no longer minds the spilling. In the palace that night, the elders sat late, retelling every detail to those who had seen it themselves, as families do, while in the new apartments the young couples spoke softly, or did not speak, learning the first grammar of married quiet. Sita stood a while at her window, looking out at her new city, the unfamiliar towers, the unfamiliar river, all of it silvered by the same familiar moon, and found it good. Below her, the city put itself to bed street by street, replete with festival, sweet with trampled flowers, and the watchmen sang the hours softly, and the Sarayu carried the moon toward the sea, and the whole newly married city slept. You will remember the 4 weddings under one canopy, and the city of Ayodhya glad to her foundations, and Sita at her new window finding her new country good. The story now lets 12 sweet years pass in a single breath, for happiness which is slow to live is quick to tell. Rama and Sita grew into one another the way 2 trees planted close grow into one shade. The princes served the kingdom, each after his nature, and Bharata with Shatrughna went for a season to visit his grandfather, the mountain king, as young men do, and the world was in order. And Dasharatha, lord of Ayodhya, grew old, in the honest way of kings who have not spared themselves, until one day, seeing white hairs in his reflection, and remembering the length of the roads he had traveled, he resolved to do the last great duty of a good king, which is to hand the kingdom on while the handing is still his to do. His mind, and the mind of his council, and the mind of the city, all rested on one name. The elders were summoned, and the ascent was like a river meeting the sea. And it was proclaimed that on the morrow, under the auspicious stars, Rama, Kausalya's son, would be consecrated as Prince Regent, to bear the kingdom up beside his father. Ayodhya went joyfully mad in an evening. Banners climbed the towers, the streets were watered and strewn with flowers, and in every doorway lamps were set ready for the morning, and the night was loud with drums and gladness, and hardly anyone slept, except in the palace the king, who slept badly, troubled by dreams he could not hold. But in the women's palace there lived an old nurse named Manthara, bent with years and bent with old fears, who had come with Kaikeyi from the mountains long ago, and loved her mistress with the fierce, crooked love that cannot tell care from grasping. Hearing the drums and learning their reason, she was afraid, in the way of servants who have wagered their whole lives on one patron. She went to Kaikeyi, who was glad at the news, as at all Rama's fortunes, for she had raised him on her knee no less than Bharata. And the old nurse talked and talked in the dim lamplight, pouring year upon year of stored anxiety into the queen's ear, saying that a king's mother is a queen, but a king's stepmother is a shadow. That Bharata, away in the mountains, was being quietly disinherited. That kindness between princes lasts only until thrones are counted. Drop by drop the whisper worked, as water works on stone, not by strength, but by returning. And by the deep of the night, the queen who had saved a king's life in battle had been talked into terror for her son, and had remembered, at the nurse's prompting, the two boons that had slept for years like coals under ash. What followed the story tells with sorrow, and without hatred, for Kaikeyi was not wicked, only misled, a queen whose love had been bent the wrong way by an old servant's fear. When the king came that evening to share his joy with her, she met him in the chamber of anger, in plain cloth, her ornaments scattered, and she called in her two boons, the ones promised on the old battlefield, and named them at last. Let Bharata be crowned. Let Rama be banished to the forest for 14 years. The old king cried out as if struck, and pleaded through the night, offering her anything else under the sky. But a boon given by a king of the house of Ikshwaku is not a coin to be taken back. And she, frightened now past reaching, held to her asking. Dawn found the king on the floor of that chamber, aged by 10 years in one night, unable even to say the words. It was Kaikeyi who sent for Rama, and Kaikeyi who told him. And here the story stands very still, to watch what Rama does, for this is the hinge of his whole life, and the reason his name is remembered. He heard it all, the crown withdrawn, the 14 years, the forest, and his face, the story says, did not change, not from pride and not from numbness, but because his heart had already given itself to something steadier than fortune. He spoke gently. Dharma, the right way, he said, is not less dear to me than a throne, and my father's word must be made true, and Bharata will be a good king. He comforted the weeping king and bowed to Kaikeyi without one hard word, and went to tell his mother, whose grief was terrible and slow to comfort, and then to Sita to say farewell. But Sita would not receive the farewell. She heard him out, the dangers, the thorns, the wild beasts, the 14 years, and she set them all aside with one sentence that wives have quoted ever since, that where Rama is, there is Ayodhya, and where he is not, there is the wilderness. She would go. He argued and lost, and the story smiles for the only time that day. And Lakshmana, Sumitra's son, the brother who was his shadow, did not even argue, but only went to string his bow. So it was settled that 3 would go where 1 was banished. They gave away their wealth to the poor and to the priests, hand over hand, lightly, as travelers shed weight. And they put off their silks, and put on the bark cloth and plain weave of forest hermits. And the city that had strung banners for a coronation watched them walk to the chariot. And the sound Ayodhya made that day, the story says, was like no sound a city makes. Tens of thousands weeping at once, softly, helplessly, as one weeps for a thing already done. Sumantra, the old charioteer, drove them south, and the people followed, a whole city walking after one chariot, refusing every entreaty to turn back, until night came down, and the crowd, worn out with grief, slept in the fields by the river Tamasa like a harvest laid flat by wind. And in the first dark of the morning, Rama, pitying them, had the chariot turned quietly and driven away by side paths, so that when the people woke and found the tracks doubling and fading, they wept again, and went home slowly. And Ayodhya from that day, the story says, was a city with its lamps dimmed, a house where someone is away. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. The chariot went on south for days to the bank of the great Ganga, where the kingdom ended and the wild country began. And there they were met, not by an enemy, but by a friend, Guha, chief of the river people, the hunters and boatmen of the shore, who loved Rama with a plain man's whole heart. He would have laid his whole rough kingdom at their feet. They would take only water and a night's rest under a tree, for exiles may not accept the comforts of towns. And Guha kept watch over them all night with his bow strung, weeping quietly, while Lakshmana stood wakeful too, and the 2 of them, prince and hunter, shared the sort of conversation the dark allows. Before dawn, Guha's own boat was made ready. Sumantra the charioteer was sent home with the empty chariot and messages of comfort that comforted no one. And he watched the boat away like a man watching his own heart cross the water. The crossing of the Ganga was made in the gray stillness before light, the oars dipping soft, the far shore coming slowly out of the mist. Midstream, the story says, Sita prayed to the river, promising offerings on the day of return, and the great water carried them kindly. On the far bank, the 3 stood a moment, looking back the way they had come, and Ayodhya was far past seeing, and they turned their faces south. From here the world was trees. Of the old king, the story tells the end quickly and gently, as the falling of a leaf long loosened. Grief settled on Dasharatha and did not lift, and on the 6th night, lying in the dark beside Kausalya, he remembered a wrong from his own young manhood. An ascetic's boy at a riverbank, struck in error in the dark by a hunting arrow that had followed only a sound, and the old blind parents whose sorrow had prophesied even then that the king too would die one day of parting from a son. The debt of that hour had come due, and he paid it without bitterness. He spoke Rama's name 3 times, softly, the way one calls a child home at dusk. And then the king of Kosala went where the tellers of stories cannot follow, and the palace woke to its own weeping. But that sorrow belongs to the city, and the story leaves it there with honor, and returns to the far bank of the Ganga, where the morning was rising warm through the leaves. Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana walked into the country of the forest, which did not know kings, and would come to love them anyway. The path was soft with old leaves. Birds spoke overhead in their unhurried counsels, and the light came down green and gold, and the great forest opened before the 3 travelers the way a door opens into a quiet house, and closed behind them just as gently, and held them, and they were not afraid. You will remember how the 3 exiles crossed the Ganga in the gray of morning, and walked into the great southern forest, and how the door of trees closed gently behind them. The story follows them now at a walker's pace, for the forest sets its own pace and rewards those who accept it. They went by hermit paths from holy place to holy place, and came at length, on the advice of the sages, to a hill called Chitrakuta, a low wooded mountain of surpassing sweetness, where the streams ran clear over red and gold stones, and peacocks called from the slopes, and the honey hung heavy in the hollow trees. There Lakshmana, the ready-handed, built them a house of timber and thatch, wide-leaved and warm, with a hearth and a shrine. And when it was done, the 3 of them stood before it almost shyly, for it was the first roof that was wholly their own. And a strange thing happened at Chitrakuta, which the story reports with tenderness. They were happy. Exile had been pronounced upon them as a punishment, and here it was, mornings of bird-song and clean water, days of gathering fruit and roots, of naming the flowers, of watching deer come stepping down the glades to eat from Sita's hand. Evenings by the hearth, while the fire told its slow stories to the walls. Rama would show Sita the mountain in its changing lights, as a man shows his beloved his own heart. And she, the earth's own child, was in her element among growing things. And Lakshmana kept the bows bright, and the woodpile high, and was content in his watchfulness. The 14 years, seen from that porch, did not look like a sentence. They looked almost like a gift misdelivered. But the world they had left could not leave them. One day the birds went quiet, and there came a far-off sound of horses and elephants and many feet. And Lakshmana, climbing a tall sal tree, saw the banners of Ayodhya moving through the trees like a slow flood. And his heart misgave him, thinking Bharata came with an army to make the exile sure. Rama only listened and shook his head, for he knew his brother. And he was right, in the way that trusting hearts are right. Bharata, Kaikeyi's son, the brother who would refuse a throne, had returned from the mountains, to find his father dead, his mother's doing uncovered, and a crown held out to him. And he had put the crown from him, as a man puts fire from his clothes. What his mother had asked, he had refused with his whole soul. And he had spoken to her a grief so deep, that she woke at last, as from a long fever, into shame and slow repentance. Then he had set out for the forest, with the whole city walking behind him, ministers, priests, soldiers, grandmothers, all of Ayodhya emptying itself southward to beg its heart back. The meeting of the brothers on Chitrakuta is one of the story's holy places, and the telling slows to honor it. Bharata came the last distance on foot, in bark cloth like an exile himself, his hair matted, his face streaked, and when he saw Rama, he fell to the earth and could not speak his name entire. Rama lifted him and held him, and asked first, before all else, after their father. And so Bharata had to be the one to say the king was dead. And the sons of Dasharatha wept together on the mountain, while the whole city wept below. When grief had spent its first force, the offerings for the dead were made at the river, with wild fruits and forest fare. For a king may be honored with whatever love can reach. Then began the gentlest argument ever held over a throne. Bharata begged Rama to return and rule, for the kingdom was his by right and by the people's love. Rama refused, for their father's word must be made true, and 14 years are 14 years. Each brother pressed the crown upon the other, each finding new reasons, the ministers weeping, the sages listening, and neither yielding, until it seemed the sun would set on the question. It was settled at last, in the way the heart settles what the head cannot. Bharata asked for Rama's sandals. They were brought, plain wooden sandals of a forest hermit, and Bharata took them upon his head like a crown, and made his vow. The sandals would be set upon the throne of Ayodhya, and Bharata would govern only as their servant, from a village outside the city walls, in bark cloth, on hermit's fare, until the 14th year returned his brother to him. If it did not, he said quietly, he would walk into the fire. And Rama blessed him, and held him long, and the two parted, which was the hardest labor either had ever done. So Ayodhya came to be ruled by a pair of sandals. And the story means no lightness by it, for it says something the tellers wished remembered, that a throne is only a place where faithfulness sits. Bharata kept his vow to the letter, living outside the city at Nandigrama like a hermit with a kingdom in trust, laying every decision before the wooden sandals as before a king. And the kingdom, strange to say, was well ruled in those years, for a land is safe where power wants nothing for itself. The story leaves him there, faithful in the gray mornings, year upon year. It is one of the quiet heroisms, and the telling bows to him in passing. Rama, when the city's dust had settled, and the birds had returned, judged that Chitrakuta now lay too near to home and memory, too easy for sorrow to find by the beaten track, and the three went deeper south, into the great wilderness called Dandaka, where the trees grew older, and the paths grew fainter, and the hermitages lay farther between, little islands of swept earth and firelight in an ocean of green. The sages of that country received them with joy, for word travels among holy men the way scent travels on water. And the exiles went from hermitage to hermitage, sometimes staying a season, sometimes a year, learning the deep forest's ways, its moods and its dangers, guarding the gentle from the cruel things that haunted the margins, so that the lamps of the hermits burned safer wherever the brothers' bows had passed. On that long wandering, they came to the hermitage of the aged sage Atri, whose wife Anasuya was famous through the 3 worlds for goodness, an old woman small as a wren and holy as a temple flame. She called Sita to her, and the two sat long together, the young wife and the ancient one. And Anasuya, delighted with her, gave her gifts of grace, garlands that would not fade, and ornaments and unguents of unearthly sweetness, and asked to hear from Sita's own lips the story of her choosing of Rama. And Sita told it shyly, and the old woman listened the way the earth listens to rain. That night the hermitage lay in a peace that could be felt at the skin, and the exiles slept within it like children in a grandmother's house. So the years of the middle exile passed, 10 of them and more, not in suffering, but in deepening. And the story does not hurry them, for this is where its people became fully themselves. Rama in patience, Sita in rootedness, Lakshmana in service. At the last, guided by the sage Agastya, mightiest of the southern hermits, who gave Rama a great bow of Vishnu's keeping and quivers that would not empty, they came to the place appointed for them, though they did not know it was appointed. It was called Panchavati, the place of 5 banyans, on the northern bank of the slow Godavari, a country of such loveliness that Sita stood silent before it. Woods heavy with flower, grass deep for the deer, the river wide and unhurried, herons standing in their own reflections. Here, said Rama, we will stay the last years. And Lakshmana built the finest of all their forest houses, wattled and thatched and floored with smoothed earth, with a view of the water. Here, said Rama, we will stay the last years. And Lakshmana built the finest of all their forest houses, wattled and thatched and floored with smoothed earth, with a view of the water. And the story settles them in, and lets the evening come. Smoke rose small and steady from the new hearth. Sita set rice to dry on a warm rock, and hung wild jasmine by the door, making the wilderness domestic by the mere fact of her attention. Rama and Lakshmana sat on the bank in the last light, speaking of their father, of Bharata governing under the Sandals, of the years already behind and the few ahead, and their voices grew slower as the light grew lower. The Godavari went on past the door, patient as all rivers, saying the one thing rivers say. The deer folded themselves into the grass. One by one the stars took their stations over Panchavati, and the little house breathed in the dark beside the water, and the forest, which keeps what it loves, kept them. You will remember the little house at Panchavati above the slow Godavari, and the rice drying on the warm rock, and the jasmine by the door. The story would gladly stay there, and for a good while it does, through a last autumn and a last winter of peace. But the Ramayana is a story about how peace is kept in the keeping of loss, and so gently, with its arm around the listener, it turns now toward the turning. It began with a wanderer of the night country, a Rakshasi, one of the night-wandering people of Lanka, whose name was Shurpanakha. She was the sister of the great Ravana, and she was used to taking what pleased her. And one day, drifting the margins of the Dandaka, she saw Rama by the river, and what she felt she called love, though it had not love's patience. She offered herself to him with the directness of her kind, and was refused with courtesy, and offered herself to Lakshmana, and was refused again. And courtesy is a language that requires two speakers. Her wanting turned, as unschooled wanting will, upon the woman it could not be, and she rushed at Sita. Lakshmana barred the way and drove her back, and in that scuffle her pride was wounded. And the story leaves it there, at a distance, for this is a tale for sleep. It says only that she fled south, crying the cry of her people to her kin. What followed came in waves, each larger, as ripples widen from a dropped stone. First her cousin Khara came up from the south with his 14 chosen fighters, and then with his whole wild army, a dust of fury rolling through the trees. And Rama sent Sita with Lakshmana to a sheltered cave, and met that army alone with the great bow Agastya had given him. And the story tells it the way one tells weather, a storm that came and broke and passed. The forest swallowed the noise as forests do. By evening the Dandaka was quiet again, quieter than before. And the hermits came out of their huts and blessed the bowmen, and the forest, in time, forgot Khara entirely, as the grass forgets a fire. But one runner had fled the field south across the sea, and the news he carried did not fade. It came to the ear of Ravana himself, lord of Lanka, learned and mighty, master of 10 heads as the tellers sing it, a king whose wisdom could not master his wanting. And with the news came Shurpanakha, salt in her voice, and she chose her words the way archers choose arrows. She did not speak first of defeat. She spoke of a woman, Sita, the loveliest, she said, that walked the earth, wasted on a hermit prince in a hut of leaves. Ravana listened on his high terrace above the sea, and the story pauses to look at him honestly, for he was no small being. He had studied the deep books and sung the deep songs. He had performed austerities that shook the heavens. He had ruled a city of gold with splendor and, in his fashion, with law. But there was in him a hollow that achievement could not fill, the hollow of a man who has taken much and been given little, and into that hollow the thought of Sita fell and echoed. He sent for Maricha. Now Maricha was a demon who had once tasted Rama's arrow, in the old days of the guarding of the right, and had been flung by it far over the southern sea, and had come down from that flight a changed being, living since as a hermit, wanting only quiet. When Ravana named his plan, and the part Maricha was to play in it, the old demon begged him, with the eloquence of the reformed, to let the thought go, telling him plainly that Rama was Dharma walking, and that this road ran only downhill into the dark. But a king in the grip of wanting hears counsel as insult. Maricha saw that his death stood in the room with him either way, and chose the death that would come from the brighter hand, and bowed. So it was that on a soft morning at Panchavati, while the mist still walked on the Godavari, a deer stepped out of the trees such as no forest ever bore. Its hide was gold, figured with silver. Its horns were tipped with light, and it moved as if it had learned grace from moonlight on water. Nearer and away, nearer and away, in the manner of a wonder that wishes to be followed. Sita, coming out with grain for the ordinary deer, saw it and stood still, and something in her that was young and had lost much reached out to it. She asked Rama to catch it for her, alive if he could. Lakshmana, the watchful one, looked hard at the creature and said what he saw, that no true deer wore such a hide, that this was likely some night thing in a borrowed shape. He was right, and it did not matter. Rama would not refuse Sita a wish so small, and wonders, after all, do walk the earth. He took up his bow, set Lakshmana at the door with the one order that mattered, guard her, and followed the gold into the green. The deer led him long and far, the story says, always almost caught, always slipping on, deeper and deeper from the river, until the sun stood high, and Rama, understanding at last the length of the deception, loosed his arrow. And the deer, falling, dropped its borrowed shape, and Maricha lay there, released, and with his last strength he did the thing he had been brought to do, crying out across the miles of forest in a voice made perfectly like Rama's own, "Help me, Lakshmana, help me." Then that troubled being's long trouble ended, and the story lets him go in peace. But the cry ran through the trees like a crack through ice, and reached the little house by the river. Sita heard it, and her heart turned over. Lakshmana did not stir from the door, for he knew his brother's strength past all frightening, and knew the forest's tricks. But fear is not reasonable, and love is not either, and Sita, terrified for Rama, spoke to Lakshmana as she had never spoken, and her words were arrows because her fear was mortal. And at last, against his knowledge, against his orders, because the alternative was to stand accused of wishing his brother dead. The watchful one bowed his head and went, and the door stood unguarded. The story does not blame her, and it does not blame him. It says only that love, pulled hard enough, will pull against itself, and that this is the oldest grief there is. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. Then a wandering holy man came up the path to the hut, staff and water pot and ochre robe, and asked, in the fair speech of such men, for alms. And Sita, who honored guests as the earth honors seed, came out with fruit and water. The story tells that the borrowed shape lasted only until courtesy required her nearness, and then Ravana stood forth in his own form, tall as a storm cloud, and named himself, and asked her to be his queen in the golden city. She answered him as a flame answers wind, with scorn that has been quoted down all the ages, calling herself Rama's, only Rama's, as the river is the sea's. But strength was his that day, and he took her up, and his chariot rose into the sky. And Panchavati fell away below, the little house, the drying rice, the jasmine by the door, all of it suddenly terribly small, and her cries went down the wind. One heart in all that country answered. Jatayu, the great vulture, old friend of the dead king Dasharatha, king of his own people of the air, was drowsing on a crag when her voice reached him, and he rose on his vast worn wings and gave chase, and overtook the chariot, and demanded she be released. And when scorn was all his answer, that old lord of the sky, far past his fighting years, made war alone above the treetops against the lord of Lanka. He broke the chariot, the story says proudly, and slew the mules of it, and for a shining moment the sky held. But age is age. Ravana's blade found the great wings, and Jatayu fell, slowly, like a mountain of feathers, and the sky was empty, and the chariot rose again and dwindled southward over the trees, over the shore, over the sea. As she was carried, Sita, thinking even then, loosed her yellow veil and her ornaments, and let them fall where a hilltop of watching monkeys might find them, seed corn of a harvest she could not foresee. Far behind, in the emptied clearing, Rama and Lakshmana came home to an open door. The story does not dwell on the hours that followed, the calling, the searching, the finding of scattered flowers. Grief came to Rama like a river in flood, and like a river it was terrible, and then, slowly, it was channeled. The brothers went south on the trail of what had passed, and found first the broken chariot, and then, still breathing, the great bird. Jatayu told them what he had seen and where the thief was lord, spending his last strength on their hope, and died with his head in Rama's lap. And Rama performed for him the rites a son performs for a father, with river water and forest flowers, saying that this too was a debt of love. Going on, they met stranger help, a vast bodiless being called Kabanda, freed by them from an old curse, who rose in light and pointed their road. And last of all, they came to a small lake country, where an aged ascetic woman named Shabari had waited out her whole life on her teacher's promise that Rama would one day come to her door. She fed him the wild berries she had gathered, tasting each, the story says, to be sure it was sweet. And no offering in the whole epic is remembered more tenderly. She blessed them toward the mountain of the monkey people, and her long waiting done, went shining to her rest. Evening found the brothers by the shore of Pampa Lake, where the water lay wide and still, holding the sunset the way memory holds a face. Tomorrow was the mountain, and allies, and the long road of return begun. But the story rests here tonight, with the water. The herons came in low over their own reflections, and settled, one by one, folding their wings like letters being closed. The lotuses shut for the night. Somewhere far to the south, in a garden she did not choose, Sita watched the same first star find its place, and was steady, and the lake held the light a long time after the sun was gone, and the night was very still. You will remember the brothers resting by Pampa Lake in the evening light, their grief channeled now into a road, and the road pointing toward the mountain of the monkey people. The story brings them there in the freshness of morning to the foot of Rishyamukha, a steep wooded mountain standing over the lake country. And it tells us who was watching them come. On that mountain lived Sugriva, the exiled king of the Vanaras, the forest people, the monkey folk, strong and quick and warm-hearted, whose kingdoms were the high places of the world. Sugriva had been driven from his throne and his home by his own mighty brother Vali, over a misunderstanding that had grown teeth, as misunderstandings between proud brothers will. And he lived now on the one mountain his brother might not enter, with 4 faithful companions watching every road for enemies. Seeing 2 tall bowmen striding through the trees below, he was afraid, and sent down the wisest of his companions to learn what they were in disguise. The one he sent was Hanuman, son of the wind, the devoted one, whose own story is a night's telling in itself. Hanuman came down the mountain in the borrowed form of a wandering scholar, mild and courteous, and questioned the strangers with such grace and in such polished speech that Rama, listening, said aside to Lakshmana that no one could speak so who had not lived long with the great books and longer with good company. And Rama answered the questions plainly, giving their names and their griefs, hiding nothing, for openness knows its own. Then Hanuman put off the borrowed form, and stood before them as himself, and bowed to the ground, and something passed between Rama and the son of the wind in that first meeting, that the rest of the story only unfolds. A recognition, a homecoming of loyalty to its object. Hanuman took the two brothers upon his own broad shoulders, the story says, and carried them up the mountain to his king. On the mountain top a fire was kindled, and Rama and Sugriva walked around it hand in hand in the sight of heaven, and were sworn friends from that hour, each taking the other's grief for his own. Sugriva told his story, the closed cave, the year of waiting, the wrestling match misread, the banishment, and how Vali had taken even his wife from him. And Rama heard it with a darkening face, and gave his word that Vali's wrong would end. And Sugriva, for his part, brought out a bundle kept safe in a cave, and opened it, and there lay a yellow veil, and bright ornaments that had fallen from the sky into the hands of his watchers. And Rama knew them, and held them, and for a while the mountain was very quiet. Then the pact was firm on both sides, throne for search, strength for strength. Of Vali, the story speaks with care, for he was no villain, but a great being gone proud. When the challenge was given, and the brothers grappled before the gates of Kishkinda, Rama, standing hidden as the pact required, loosed the single arrow that the pact required, and Vali fell with his hand still in his brother's shadow. What follows is one of the epic's honest hours. Vali, dying, questioned Rama, asking by what right a prince of Dharma had struck from concealment a king who had done him no wrong. And Rama answered without anger, as Valmiki gives it, speaking of law and wardship and the wrong done to a brother's wife. And Vali, weighing the answers in the scales of his going, accepted them, and gave his son Angada into Rama's keeping, and asked that his people be dealt with kindly, and laid his head back. Tara, his queen, wise Tara, mourned him with a wisdom that silenced the mountain, and the story honors her grief and does not hurry it. Then the pyre was built, and the rites were done, with a king's fullness, and Sugriva was crowned in Kishkinda, the cave city behind the waterfalls, and Angada, Vali's son, was made prince beside him, and the wound in the house of the Vanaras was bound up at last. By then the year had turned, and the sky in that country stood up in mountains of cloud, and the rains came. Now the story does a gracious thing, which the old poet did before it, and lets the war of errands wait while the world is washed. For 4 months the monsoon owned the earth. The rivers rose and ran red gold with the hills' soil. The roads vanished. Kings and armies everywhere sat still. And on the slopes of Prasravana, in a wide dry cave with a view of falling water, Rama and Lakshmana kept the season. All day the rain walked the mountains, sometimes soft as breath on the leaves, sometimes drumming deep, and the sound of it filled the cave the way sleep fills a body. The peacocks danced their rain dances on the terraces of stone. The frogs took up their old chorus in the new pools. Scent of wet earth rose thick and sweet as incense, and the lightning moved far off behind the clouds like lamplight behind curtains, too distant for thunder, a flicker, and darkness, and a flicker again. Rama grieved in that season, for stillness gives grief its opening, and the story lets him grieve, missing Sita with the ache of the paired for the parted, counting the impassable weeks. But Lakshmana tended him with steady sense, saying that the rains that stopped the search were also falling on Lanka, that no road ran anywhere for anyone, that strength gathered in rest is not lost, and slowly the season did its work, as seasons will, wearing sorrow smooth. The brothers watched the waterfall and talked of their father, of Ayodhya under the same clouds, of Bharata keeping his vigil by the Sandals. And between the talking there were long silences that were also a kind of talking. The cave smelled of wood smoke and rain. The lamp burned small in the vast grey afternoons. If sleep has a season, it is this one, and the story lingers in it as long as a story may. Then one morning the light changed. The clouds rose higher and whitened. The rivers ran clear again and returned to their beds. The mud of the roads set firm, and the sky came back deep blue and swept, with the high traveling geese writing their lines across it toward the north. Autumn, the season of kings and journeys, stood on the mountains, And when Sugriva, comfortable in his regained city, was slow to remember his oath, it was Lakshmana who came to Kishkinda with storm in his face, and Tara, wise Tara, who met him with soft words and set the house in motion. And Sugriva, ashamed and roused, made amends in the grand manner of his people. Runners went out from Kishkinda on every wind, to the mountains and the coasts, to the forests and the caves, summoning the hosts of the Vanaras. And the hosts came. In numbers the story gives in words too large to mean anything but everyone. The bear people too, under Jambavan, the ancient one, king of bears, wise with the wisdom of the first days. They gathered on the plains below the city, in the clean autumn light, a sea of brown and gray and gold, restless and glad. And Sugriva divided them into 4 great searches, one for each quarter of the earth, giving each host a month and no more. But it was to the southern search that he gave his best, Angada the prince to lead it, Jambavan to counsel it, and Hanuman, son of the wind, to be its heart. For south was the way the chariot had gone. And Rama, watching the southern company make ready, called Hanuman aside, quietly, and gave into his hand his own ring, marked with his name, saying that Sita, who had never seen Hanuman, would know by this token whose messenger he was. Hanuman bowed to the earth and bound the ring into his waistband. And the story marks the moment, for a great trust was passing from hand to hand, and both of them knew it. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. The searches poured away into the 4 directions, and the plains emptied, and quiet came back to Kishkinda. That evening Rama stood at the cave mouth on Prosravana, watching the last of the southern host wind down through the foothills and out of sight, small and smaller in the vast clean evening. And the first stars came out over the washed world, and far away to the east the very last of the rains was leaving, a single grey curtain trailing over the hills, moving away and away, until the sky forgot it, and the mountain slept. You will remember the 4 searches pouring out of Kishkinda into the 4 quarters of the earth, and Rama's ring bound safe in Hanuman's waistband, and the washed autumn sky over everything. The story follows the southern road as the heart of it went south. The companies of the north and east and west searched their months out faithfully, mountain by mountain and shore by shore, and came home empty-handed, as the story always knew they would, for the world is wide, and the truth was southward. The southern host, Angada leading, Jambavan counseling, Hanuman at its heart, combed the tangled country of hills and caverns moon by moon, growing leaner and quieter, until they came out at last upon the very rim of the land, where the earth ends in white sand and the southern ocean begins. And there they stopped, with their month spent and nothing found, and despair sat down among them like a grey companion. It was there, on the shore of the end of the land, that help came in the strangest of the story's shapes. On a crag above them roosted an ancient vulture, wing-worn and flightless, vast as a fallen cloud. And hearing the Vanaras speak the name of Jatayu, he stirred and called down to them, for Jatayu had been his younger brother. This was Sampati, the old vulture, Jatayu's brother, who in the pride of youth had flown with him too near the sun, and had spread his own wings over his brother when the burning came, and had fallen scorched into this far country, wingless, and lived there since on what the shore provided, waiting out an old prophecy that his wings would return on the day he served the errand of Rama. The Vanaras told him all, and grief and gladness fought in the old bird, and he turned his far-seeing eyes south, the eyes of the vulture kind that read the earth from the roof of the sky. And he saw across the water what no Vanara could see, an island city of towers and gold, and in a garden of that city a woman guarded and grieving. And he named the distance plainly, 100 yojanas, 100 leagues of the old measure, of open sea, and named the city Lanka, and blessed the searchers. And even as he blessed them, the story says, new feathers came upon his wings, like spring upon a burned hillside, and the old lord of the air rose once more into his kingdom. 100 leagues of open sea. The Vanaras stood on the shore and measured themselves against that blue immensity, one by one, aloud, and one by one fell short, 10 yojanas, 20, 60, 80, each strong one naming his utmost and sitting down in silence, until at last every eye had turned, slowly, to the one who had said nothing. Hanuman sat apart, looking at the water. And here the story sets one of its most loved scenes. For Hanuman, son of the wind, did not know his own strength. A curse laid on him in his wild childhood had veiled his power from his own mind until someone should remind him of it face to face. It was Jambavan, the Ancient One, who came and sat beside him and did the reminding, in the low voice of the old to the mighty, telling him of his birth from the wind itself, of the infant leap he once made at the rising sun, of the powers that slept in him like fire in wood, saying at last, "Rise, remember yourself, and cross." And Hanuman listened, and remembered, and began to grow, and the telling of that growing, and of the leap from the mountain Mahendra that bent the mountain like a bow, and of all that met him over the waves, the story gives in one loving breath, and passes on, for the tellers give that leap a whole book of its own, and we have kept that book for another night's telling. It is enough that as the sun went down over the sea, a small shape that had been a great shape came down soft as a moth on the farther shore, and Lanka stood before him with her lamps coming on, gold above the water in the dusk. But now the story turns, as it has wished to turn all this while, away from the deeds of the strong to the stillness of the steadfast, to the one the whole world was looking for. In the heart of Ravana city, past the walls and the gardens, there stood a grove of Ashoka trees, kept beautiful the way cages are kept beautiful. And in that grove, beneath a great Shimshapa tree, a rosewood of deep and patient shade, Sita kept her vigil. The story finds her thin with fasting, dressed still in the yellow silk grown soft with wear, her hair in the single braid of the parted wife, surrounded day and night by Rakshasi guards whose duty was to weary her into consent, some taunting, some threatening, a few, in the way of guards long assigned, grown half gentle. Ravana came to that grove in state, offering her queenship of the golden city, treasuries, precedence over all his wives. And she answered him from behind a blade of grass she set between them, in words that have been repeated wherever this story is told, that a lamp does not leave the flame for the moth's asking, that Rama would come, that the sea was no protection, and the city no wall. Wanting that is refused, turns cruel, and he gave her 1 year to bend, and months of that year were gone. She did not bend. The story wants the listener to understand that of all the strengths in the Ramayana, the leap, the bow, the armies, none is greater than this one, a woman sitting still under a tree, keeping faith. She had one friend in that place, and the story is glad to name her. Among the Rakshasi guards was one called Trijata, older than the rest, and dream-touched, And on a certain night, Trijata woke from a dream that frightened her companions quiet, a dream of a white mountain walking on the sea, of a man in a chariot of light, with a woman beside him, robed like the morning, of the golden city, dark and its towers fallen. And she told the guards plainly that this captive would be this city's fate, and that kindness shown her now would be remembered. After that, the taunting softened somewhat, and Sita, who overheard, folded the dream away in her heart like a lamp folded in cloth. On the darkest night of her keeping, when hope had worn thinnest, and she had begun to despair even of despair, the grove was very quiet, and the moon stood in the Shimshapa branches, and in that quiet a small voice began to speak above her, soft as leaves moving. It was telling a story. It told of a king of Ayodhya and his 4 sons, of a bow broken in Mithila, of an exile born with grace, of a golden deer and an empty door, of a friendship sworn on a mountain, of searches sent to the world's 4 ends, and it told the story truly, name by name. And Sita listened without moving, afraid at first that grief had learned ventriloquy. But when she looked up at last, there among the leaves in the moonlight sat a small monkey with palms joined, watching her with eyes full of tears. And Hanuman, for it was he, made small as a house cat for stealth, came down the trunk with the softness of falling ash, and bowed to the ground before her, and gave his name, and his king's name, and his errand's name. And when doubt still stood in her eyes, for the night country was full of shapeshifters, he brought out from his waistband the ring, and laid it in her 2 cupped palms. And she knew it, the story says, as she would have known Rama's hand in the dark, and she pressed it to her eyes, and for the first time in all those months, the fountain of her weeping was joy. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. They spoke long and low under the tree, the great heart and the steadfast one, and he offered, in the sweet extravagance of his devotion, to carry her home across the sea that very night on his own back. And she declined it with the courtesy of a queen, saying that Rama's own arm must free her, that honor asked that much, and that she would not touch another's body of her own will. And Hanuman bowed to the wisdom and the faith of it, and asked instead for a token of her own. She drew from her braid the chudamani, the crest jewel of her hair, kept hidden through everything, and gave it to him with a message for Rama, tender enough that the tellers lower their voices for it, and a mother's blessing for himself. What Hanuman did in Lanka after they parted, the uproar and the burning and the fear he left behind in the golden city, the story gives here in a single distant sentence, as Sita saw it from her grove. A redness rising on the night at the city's edge, and voices crying that one monkey had done it all. And she smiled in the dark, unafraid, for no fire of that burning could come near the friend of her friend. Hanuman crossed back over the sea with the dawn behind him, and came down among the waiting searchers like good news made flesh, and their return north was one long swelling of joy through the forest kingdoms. In Kishkinda he stood before Rama and said the 4 words the story polishes like a jewel, "I have seen Sita." Then he laid the crest jewel in Rama's hand, and Rama held it and could not speak for a while, and the jewel caught the evening light. And in the far south, in a garden of captivity that now had hope in it, Sita watched the same evening come, and the sea lay all night long between them, patient, leveled, silvered from shore to shore, as if it already knew it would soon be asked to become a road. You will remember the crest jewel laid in Rama's hand, and Hanuman's 4 words, "I have seen Sita," and the sea lying level between the lovers like a road not yet built. The story now gathers itself gently for the going. In Kishkinda, the drums of assembly were sounded, deep and slow, and the hosts of the Vanaras and the bear people came together on the plains once more, no longer to search, but to march. And the story tells their setting out, the way one tells the moving of a season, a whole landscape rising and flowing south, brown and gray and gold, over hills and through passes, day upon day, unhurried and unstoppable, until the smell of salt came on the wind, and the land laid itself down at last into white sand. And there was the ocean, filling half the world, and beyond it, invisible, the golden city. There the great host made its camp along the shore, fires by the thousand in the dusk, and the waves came in and went out, saying the one thing waves say. And it was there, on the eve of everything, that a small company came across the water from the other side, 5 of the night country flying in the forms of birds, and their leader alighted and asked with joined hands for refuge. This was Vibhishana, Ravana's youngest brother, the brother who chose Dharma. In the golden city he had stood in council and said the unsayable, that the taking of Sita was a wrong that would sink them all, that she should be returned with honor while honor remained. And he had said it 2 and 3 times, and been scorned for it. and at last been told by his own brother to be gone. So he had come, leaving palace and family and every belonging, carrying only his name and his uprightness to the side where Dharma stood. The Vanara captains doubted him aloud, for the night country was full of tricks. But Rama heard them out and answered in the way that made him Rama, that one who comes seeking shelter is not turned away, whatever the cost, that this was the law of his house and of his heart. And Vibhishana was received and embraced. And the story says Rama promised him there, on the shore, that when all this was over, he would be crowned king of Lanka in his brother's place. And the sea wind moved along the lines of fires, and something in the night eased, as a house eases when a right thing is done in it. Then came the matter of the crossing, and the story slows here, for this is one of its most loved passages, and slowness is the honor it pays. The ocean is not an enemy, but it is vast, and a bridge of 100 yojanas had never been built in the world. Rama sat down on the shore in the posture of asking, on a seat of kusha grass, and fasted, and waited 3 days and 3 nights, asking the spirit of the deep to give the armies away. And when the deep kept silent, the story lets us see, just once, the other fire in Rama, the fire that sleeps under all that patience. For he rose on the 3rd night and set an arrow to the great bow, and the shore shook, and the creatures of the deep fled glittering, and the ocean himself came up out of his own waves then, crowned with foam and garlanded with rivers, with his hands joined, speaking softly, saying that each thing in creation must keep its nature, that water cannot harden, nor deeps grow shallow, but that he would bear whatever was laid upon him, and bear it gladly. And he named the one who could do the laying. Among the host was a Vanara called Nala, son of the builder of the gods, with his father's craft sleeping in his hands. "Let Nala build," said the ocean, "and what Nala builds I will carry as a mother carries a child." So the building of the bridge began, and the story builds it slowly, stone by stone, for the listener's sake, because there is no more restful labor in all the epic. The word went through the host, and the hills themselves seemed to move, for the Vanaras uprooted crags and boulders and whole flowering trees, and bore them down to the shore in endless winding lines, singing as they came, the way harvesters sing. And Nala stood in the shallows directing, calm as a man laying out a garden, and the stones were passed hand to hand to hand, and set down upon the water, and the water bore them. The tellers sing that the stones floated for the love of Rama, and some say his name was written on each one as it was laid, name laid upon name across the deep. And the story lets both tellings stand, for a bridge is faith made walkable either way. 5 days the building lasted, dawn to dusk, and each evening the finished arm of it reached farther out into the glittering distance, straight and white as a moonbeam laid on the sea. And each night the host slept on the shore a little nearer to hope, and the waves came in under the new stones, softly, softly, learning their new work. On the 5th evening, the far end of the bridge touched the sands of Lanka, and a shout went up from the host that the story says was heard in the golden city like far thunder. And then, because armies are only many tired hearts, the shouting sank quickly into sleep, and the camp lay quiet under the wheeling stars, and the finished bridge lay quiet on the quiet sea, waiting to be walked. The crossing began in the gray of morning and lasted 2 days. And the story tells it wide and slow, like something seen by the seabirds. The whole host flowing out along the white causeway between 2 blues, water below and sky above, rank upon rank. The bear people dark and patient, the Vanaras bright and restless, banners small in the enormous light, and in the midst of them Rama and Lakshmana borne on the shoulders of Hanuman and Angada. And everywhere, above and below, the sea keeping its promise, level and mild, lifting no wave against them, while far down in the green light the great creatures of the deep rose and paced the marchers like an escort. By the 2nd evening the host stood on the farther shore, on Lanka's own white sand, and made camp on the slopes above it, and the fires came out again by the 1,000 on that side of the water, a new constellation facing the old. And in the golden city, in a high room lit with lamps of scented oil, Ravana, lord of Lanka, stood at his window over the sea and looked north at those fires. The story gives him this hour, alone, without his counselors, and it looks at him with the honesty it has kept for him all along. A king of vast learning and vast deeds, master of song and scripture, standing at the top of a tower he had built himself, watching the light of a bridged ocean, the one impossible thing, burning quietly on his own shore. His counselors had spoken in the day, some for war, one again and again for giving back what was taken, and he had heard nothing new in any of it, for the deep books he had mastered said it too, and wisdom he had in libraries, only not in the hand that had done the taking. pride is a high tower with no stair down. He put out the lamps himself, one by one, and stood a long time in the dark. And the story leaves him there without mockery, a great being who could see the turning of the wheel and could not turn himself, and goes back out quietly to the shore. For on the shore that night the two camps lay under one sky, and the same stars stood over the sleeping Vanaras and the sleeping city, over the just and the unjust, over the bridge resting from its crossing, and the sea resting under the bridge. And the night wind went along the sand from fire to fire, as if counting them, and found them all banked and warm, and went on out over the black water, and the world, on the last night before everything, slept the way the world always sleeps, deeply, not knowing tomorrow, held in the old arms of the dark. You will remember the two camps sleeping under one sky, the host of the bridge on the shore, and the golden city on its hill, and the night wind going from fire to fire over the sand. The story must now tell of the war, and it tells it in its own way, the way of this telling, from far off and gently, as something long finished, a storm remembered by the shore it washed. For all wars end, and this one ended well, and the ending is where we are going.
It began with a last asking. Angada, Vali's son, went alone into the golden city as Rama's herald, and stood in the high court and offered peace one final time, Sita's return for the host's departure, honor kept on both sides. The offer was refused, as everyone in that hall knew it would be, and the young prince came back through the gates, and the gates were shut. And that evening the lamps of the two camps burned a little brighter, the way lamps do when the house is anxious. Then came the days of the war, and the story folds them together, deliberately, into one long dream-like passage. Dawns of conch shells calling far away, days of dust rising over the plain like weather, evenings when the dust settled and the physicians and the water-bearers walked the field, night after night the fires, and through it all the city stood on its hill with its towers catching the light, morning and evening, indifferent and beautiful.
Out of those folded days the story lifts, gently, only a few things, and holds them to the light, and puts them down again. It lifts the serpent arrows of Indrajit, Ravana's son, wreathed in storm and illusion, he who roared like the cloud, whose weapons came as bonds of living darkness, and how the brothers themselves were bound by them, and lay as if gone, and the host despaired, until Garuda, the great gold-winged one, before whom all serpents loosen, came like a wind out of heaven, and the bonds fell away, and the brothers rose, and hope rose with them. twice more the story of those days bends low, and twice more it is lifted. And the telling keeps, on purpose, its softest light for the gentlest of the war's wonders, which was this: when Lakshmana, the watchful one, at last lay gravely stricken, and the life in him burned low, the physician of the Vanaras named the one remedy, a herb of power that grew a world away, on a mountain of the Himalaya. And the night was almost spent already, and no one could go so far and return, except one. Hanuman, son of the wind, remembered himself once more, and rose into the dark like a second moon, and was gone north over the sea, over the land, over everything. And the story of that night flight is told entire in another of our tellings. So here it gives only the picture the whole host saw before dawn. A mountain, an entire mountain, silvered with sleeping herbs, and trailing its own small weather, coming quietly through the high stars in two great hands, because its bearer, unable to find one herb among so many, had brought the garden whole. The scent of that mountain crossed the camp ahead of it, cool and green, and where the scent passed, the fallen stirred. And Lakshmana opened his eyes and asked, in the way of the waked, whether he had slept long. And around him in the dark, the host laughed and wept together, softly. And the mountain was carried home before the sun rose, and set back in its place. And if it sits a little differently now than before, the story says the Himalaya has never complained. It lifts, too, with a strange tenderness it does not try to explain. The waking of Kumbhakarna, the vast sleeper, Ravana's second brother, a being so large that the tellers give up their measures, who, by an old blessing misspoken, slept half of every year, and could not choose the halves. The city needed him, and so they went to wake him, and the story smiles through its sadness here, telling how they carried mountains of food past his sleeping face to tempt him, how they sounded drums against his breastbone and drove elephants across his chest, and how he woke at last, the way weather changes, slowly, hugely, without malice, and asked what all the noise was for. And being told, the Vast One, who was wiser asleep than his brother awake, said plainly to Ravana that the thing done was wrong, that the woman should go home with honor. And then, because he was of the old kind whose loyalty outweighs their judgment, he armed himself anyway, and went out to spend himself for a cause he had just called unjust. The story tells his end from very far away, as the falling of something enormous and almost peaceful, like a cliff returning to the sea. and it lets him have the epitaph he would have chosen, that he was faithful, and that afterward he slept, in the way of all things, and this time no drum could reach him, and the sleep was kind. And then the story comes to the last day, and grows very quiet. On the last day the plain emptied of lesser matters, and the Lord of Lanka came out in his chariot in all his splendor. And the gods, watching, sent down to Rama, who stood on the earth, their own chariot and their own charioteer, so that the two ends of the long story met at last on equal ground. Of the meeting itself, the telling keeps only the rhythm. Two tides, the story says, moving against each other through that whole day, gold flashing far off, the earth humming like a struck string, and then resting, and resting longer as the day wore down toward evening. Arrows cut away the 10-crowned heads, the tellers sing, and the heads returned, for pride grows back, until at last Rama set to the string the great arrow of Brahma, given long before, and kept for the one necessary hour, the arrow into which the wind and the sun and the weight of mountains had been folded when the world was young, and loosed it with his whole stillness behind it, and it went the way truth goes, quietly, once, and it did not miss, and the long wrong was over. The story does not linger where he fell. It goes instead to the sound that came after, which was no sound at all, the enormous silence of a thing completed, into which slowly came the ordinary evening voices of the sea. And in that silence the story does what the great stories do. It kneels beside the fallen. Vibhishana, the brother who chose Dharma, wept over the brother whose court had cast him out. And Rama came and stood beside him, and spoke of Ravana without one word of triumph, saying that hostility ends at death, that what lay here had been a great being, learned, valiant, generous to his own, ruined by a single unmastered wanting, and that his funeral should lack nothing. And Mandodari, Ravana's queen, mourned him with a lament the poets still borrow, and the pyres were built high and honorably, and the rites were done in fullness, and the smoke went up and leaned away over the water, and burned down through the evening to embers, to warmth, to quiet. So ended the long night of Lanka, the story says, not in shouting, but in ceremony. And the city on the hill, which had shone so hard for so long, seemed to soften in the dusk, like a face unclenching into sleep. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. Read only the provided text. Do not add or improvise any extra words. That evening, Vibhishana was crowned within the walls, the good brother in the high place at last, with the blessing of victor and vanquished alike. And his first decree was rest, and rest came. The host lay down where it was, on the warm sand, too tired for songs. And the sea came in and went out, unhurried, mending the silence. And above the quiet field and the quiet city, the stars came out all together, the patient ones, who had watched the whole of it, and said nothing, and would say nothing, ever, being stars. Ash settled, the sea grew calm, and somewhere toward morning, in the grayness before light, the first bird of the island tried its voice, once, twice, softly, like a question, and the new day, having no war in it anywhere, began. You will remember the morning after the long night, the first bird trying its voice over the quiet city, and Vibhishana crowned within the walls, and the war nowhere in the new day. The story now comes to the meeting it has carried across 200 pages and 14 years, and it comes to it with slow steps, as the heart does when a longing is about to be answered, and can hardly bear its own arrival. Word was sent to the Ashoka grove. It was Hanuman who carried it, as was right, the friend who had found her in the dark time. And he came to the Shimshapa tree softly and bowed, and said that the war was over, that Ravana was fallen, that Rama was victorious and well. And Sita, the story says, received the news she had lived on hope of for so long, and could not speak at all. And her silence, Hanuman said afterward, was the fullest speech he ever heard. She was arrayed then as a queen again, and borne through the city. And the people of Lanka, who bore her no hatred, came out to see the woman for whom the world had crossed the sea. And so, at last, in the sight of 2 armies and 2 peoples, Sita, Janaka's daughter, the earth's own child, stood again before Rama, Prince of Ayodhya. And the story stands very still while they look at one another. And then the story tells a hard thing honestly and gently, as it was told of old, and the listener may rest while it is told, for it ends in radiance. Rama, who was a king before all watching eyes, as well as a husband, spoke coldly in that hour of honor, of the long captivity, of what the world would say. And the words fell on the assembly like a winter. And Sita answered him not with pleading, but with a dignity that has been hers in every telling since, grieving that strength should doubt what it could not see. And she turned to Lakshmana and asked him to build a fire. He built it, weeping, with a brother's hands that had never once disobeyed and never once obeyed so hard. And Sita walked around her husband in farewell, and called on Agni, the fire himself, the witness of all truth in this world, saying, as one telling has it, "If my heart has never left Rama, then let the fire know it." And she entered the flame with the calm of one entering a doorway home. And the fire refused her. The flames, the story says, bent away from her like grass in wind, and would not so much as warm the flowers in her hair. And then out of the heart of the burning rose, Agni himself, in his own form, bright beyond looking, bearing Sita unharmed in his 2 arms. And his voice was the voice of fire given words. "Here is Sita," he said, "blameless, radiant, true. Her heart has held one name only through every darkness. Receive her, and let no word be said against her, now or ever, for the fire has spoken." And the gods of the upper air came down about that place, the story tells, and said with one voice what the fire had said. And Rama, weeping now where all could see, answered that he had never doubted her in his own heart, but that the world's tongue needed the fire's testimony, and now had it, past all unsaying. And he received her, and the 2 were joined again, and the assembly's weeping turned to gladness, the way night turns at last to morning. The story bows here to Sita, and asks the listener to mark it well, that of the 2 fires in that field, the pyre and the testimony, it was the woman who passed through hers and came out brighter. The 14th year was in its last days now, and Bharata's vow waited in Ayodhya, so the going home was made swift and wonderful. Pushpaka was brought forth, the flying palace of the old days, wide as a hall of pillars and light as a thought, wrought of white and gold, which moved through the sky at the wish of its master. And Rama and Sita and Lakshmana went aboard, and with them, for none could bear the parting yet, Vibhishana the king, and Sugriva, and Hanuman, and Angada, and Jambavan, and the chief companions of the long road. And the great craft rose from Lanka, soft as a lamp being lifted, and turned north. And the story now gives the listener its gentlest gift, the whole epic seen again, backward, from the air, small and healed and far away. "Look," said Rama to Sita, his voice low, as the sea slid beneath them. "There is the bridge, resting on the water, the bridge of names. And there the shore, where the host lay in fires by the 1,000. There, see, is Kishkinda of the waterfalls, where a friendship was sworn at fire. And there the cave slopes of Prasravana, where the long rains sang. And there, small as a fallen leaf, Rishamukha, where a scholar came down the mountain, and everything began to mend. The mountains turned slowly under them, and the rivers came and went like silver threads. And he showed her Panchavati of the 5 banyans, the little house still standing above the Godavari, the door still open where grief had walked in. And it was only a clearing now, already half taken back by flowers. And Sita looked down at it a long while, and what she thought the story does not say. And on, north, the hermitages, one by one, Atri's clearing, where old Anasuya had held her hands, Chitrakuta of the sweet streams, where Bharata had taken the sandals, the wide Ganga, where Gu's boat had crossed in the grey morning, all of it drifting backward beneath them like a life reread in bed by lamplight, sorrow gone small with height, kindness still visible from any distance, and at each remembered place the heart of the listener, like the heart of the travelers, may set something down. Very slow, soft, low, and even, with unhurried pauses at the end of every sentence. Keep the energy calm and soothing throughout. They came down first at the hermitage of Bharadwaja, for the year's last day was not yet spent. And from there Hanuman was sent ahead, swift and glad, to carry the news to Bharata, and the story gives that meeting its own quiet honor. In the village outside Ayodhya, in a hermit's hut beside a throne that held 2 wooden sandals, Hanuman found a thin man in bark cloth with matted hair, worn fine by 14 years of a vow perfectly kept, and told him, "Your brother is coming." And Bharata, the brother who refused a throne, wept the way rain breaks a drought, and gave the messenger every gladness he had, and set the whole city moving. So, when Pushpaka came over Ayodhya at last, the exiles looked down not on the dimmed city of their leaving, but on a city remade overnight in light, garlands across every street, banners on every tower, and the road south one long river of people come out to meet them. And the sound that rose to the flying palace was tens of thousands of voices saying one name, gladly, over and over, the name that means the one in whom others find rest. The meeting of the brothers needs few words, and the story spends few. Bharata bowing to the sandals' owner, Rama lifting him from the earth and holding him long, the debt of faithfulness paid in full on both sides. And then the coronation, delayed 14 years, was held in fullness, and the telling walks through it slowly, savoring the way the city did. Rama was bathed with the waters of the sacred rivers, brought in golden vessels borne by kings. And Sita was arrayed beside him, and Vasishta the ancient set the crown upon his head. And gifts went out in rivers, cattle and gold and cloth. And to every friend of the hard years some perfect honor was found. And when Rama unclasped from his own throat a necklace of pearls without price, and held it toward Hanuman, the story tells that Hanuman received it and looked at it, and the assembly held its breath. And then the son of the wind said that the best of gifts was his already, for his king lived in his heart, and whoever doubted it might look. And the story says no more than that. And the pearls, they say, were dearer to Rama returned than kept. That night Ayodhya lit every lamp it owned. In every window, on every sill, along every street and stair, and rooftop and temple wall, the small flames stood in their thousands upon thousands, until the city by the Sarayu was a field of stars, answering the field above. And the tellers say that this is why, to this day, on the dark night of the year's turning, the lamps are lit in row upon row in every home that keeps the festival, remembering the night the exile ended and the light came home. Rama and Sita stood together on the high terrace and looked out over the burning sweetness of it, the city that had waited, the river carrying small drifting lamps toward the sea, and neither spoke, for there was nothing left to ask for. Below them the songs went on late, and then less late, and then were done. And household by household, flame by flame, the lamps were lowered, and the long first night of the long peace settled over Ayodhya like a blanket drawn up by a mother's hand. And the whole story, at last, lay down. You will remember the night of the lamps, the city glowing like a field of stars, and the first night of the long peace drawn up over Ayodhya like a blanket. The story is nearly home now, and this last chapter is a slow one, made for the edge of sleep, for it tells of the years when nothing happened, which are the best years there are, and of how the story itself learned to sing. They called that age Rama Raja, the reign of Rama, and the tellers describe it the way one describes a perfect season, not event by event, for peace has no events, but quality by quality, slowly, like light moving across a floor. The rains came when the fields wanted them, the story says, and stopped when the fields had drunk. The rivers kept their banks. The mango and the jackfruit bore past the reach of counting. The cattle were deep in grass, and the roads were safe from end to end of the land, so that a child with a gold bangle might walk from the mountains to the sea and meet only people who fed her. Doors were shut against weather, never against men. The old did not bury the young. Sickness grew shy, and grief, finding so little work in Kosala, grew old itself and dozed. In the evenings, the towns filled with the one sound that means a country is well, which is unhurried talk, porch to porch, while the lamps are lit and the meal cooks slow, and nobody anywhere is afraid of the morning. Year upon year upon year it went so. The story says, 10 years, and 10 more, and 10 more, and the kingdom breathed the way a sleeper breathes who is deep past dreaming, evenly, evenly, evenly. Rama ruled from the old throne with Sita beside him, and the brothers each in his honor near, Bharata at his right hand, Lakshmana at his left, Shatrughna keeping the outer marches, and Hanuman always somewhere in the shadow of the pillars, wanting nothing but nearness. The king heard the smallest petitioner first, the tellers say, and sat late for the slow of speech. And the queen's charities went out quietly by the kitchen doors, unannounced, the way the dew goes out, and was found in the morning to have been everywhere. So the years of the peace were spent, coin by golden coin, and the story which has earned its rest would gladly end here, and in many a household telling it does. But the oldest telling carries one gift more, a stranger and a deeper one, and framed as that later telling gives it, framed as the poet's own remembering, this quiet telling will carry it too, gently, to the end. For the story tells that the story itself was not yet born, and had still to be made. Far up the holy rivers, in a forest hermitage of swept earth and birdsong, there lived the first poet, Valmiki, a sage who had been in his youth a wild man of the roads, and had been turned by a chance meeting with holiness, the way a river is turned, once at one bend and forever. In that telling, it is said that Sita came in her later years to dwell in her quietness among the hermit women of that place, honored by all, keeping her own counsel, at home among growing things, as the earth's child had always been, and that under Valmiki's roof her 2 sons were born, twin boys, Lava and Kusha, bright as new lamps, and the old poet raised them at his knee as his own. And it was in those same years, the telling says, that the song came to Valmiki. It began with a small sorrow, a hunter by the river, a pair of cranes, one bird falling, the other crying over it. And out of the old poet's pity a curse broke from him that came out, to his own wonder, in perfect meter, grief speaking in measured music, And he stood by the river, listening to what he had said, and understood that a new thing had entered the world. And the great god Brahma, the Shaper, came to him in that hour, the telling says, and set him his life's task, to sing in that new meter the whole story of Rama, all of it, the seen and the unseen, the sweet and the bitter, so that it should never be lost while rivers run. So Valmiki sat down under his own trees and closed his eyes, and the whole of it rose before him like a country seen from Pushpaka, and he made the song. 24,000 verses he made, the tellers count, in 6 books and more, and he taught it, verse by verse, in the cool of the mornings, to the 2 bright boys at his knee, whose own place inside the song he knew, and did not tell them. And Lava and Kusha learned the whole of it by heart, the way water learns the shape of its bed, not knowing they were learning their own mother and father. Now it happened that Rama, the king, held in those years a great rite of kings, the Ashwamedha, the horse rite, with the whole land gathered in a city of tents by the river. And singers and sages came to it from every quarter, and among them came the old poet with his 2 pupils. And on a certain morning the 2 boys stood up before the assembly and before the king, and began to sing. They sang the city by the Sarayu, and the childless king, and the payasa warm from the fire. They sang the bow that broke like the sky clearing, and the garland, and the 2 boons, and the sandals on the throne. They sang the golden deer, and the empty door, and the old vulture's last flight, and the friend on the mountain, and the ring falling like a star into 2 cupped palms, and the bridge of names laid stone by stone on the patient sea, and the long night, and the lamps. Morning upon morning they sang it, passage by passage, and the assembly leaned to them as fields lean to rain. And the king sat very still, listening to his own life given back to him as music, and looking, the telling says, at the faces of the singers, in which he saw more and more, until he could see nothing else, the face of Sita. And so, by the mouth of her own sons, singing her faithfulness before all the world, the last knot of the story was untied, and the king knew his boys, and the boys their father, and what had been parted was brought, in the way the deepest tellings mean it, home. Of Sita's own homegoing, that later telling speaks briefly and with great tenderness, and so shall we. Summoned once more before the assembly, she made no defense and asked for none, for the fire had spoken long ago, and she was done with proving. She called instead softly on her first mother, the earth who had cradled her in the furrow before any king found her, saying, "If I have been true mother, take me home." And the ground opened before the thrones, the telling says, not as a wound, but as a door, and out of it rose a shining seat borne by the serpents that hold the world. And the earth herself received her daughter into her lap, and the furrow closed over her softly, the way bedclothes close over a child carried in a sleep. And where she had stood, flowers. The assembly wept, and the king wept, but the telling itself does not quite. For it knows what the earth knows, that this was not a losing, but a keeping, and that everything planted returns, and is not gone. Rama ruled long after, with the golden image of Sita beside him at every rite, for he took no other queen ever. And when at last the time of the story's own ending came, it came not as ruin, but as completion. An old messenger came to the king, the telling says, from the timeless country, saying it was time. And Rama set his house in order, crowned his sons and his brothers' sons in their portions, and walked out of Ayodhya on a morning, northward to the Sarayu, the river of his whole life. And the whole city walked with him, unwilling to be parted, the old and the young, the human and the Vanara even, they say, the animals of the streets. And together in gladness, with the sound of singing far ahead of them, they entered the bright water, and went where the tellers of stories cannot follow. And the story of Rama in this world was complete. But a completed story is not an ended one. And here is the last gift of the telling, the one it saved. The song did not stop. Lava and Kusha sang it and taught it, and those who heard taught others, singer to singer, mother to child, porch to porch, kingdom to kingdom, year upon 100 years, in temple courtyards and harvest fields, in palace halls and one-lamp kitchens. In every tongue the land has ever spoken, and it is being sung still, tonight, here, now, in this room, softly to you. And somewhere it is always evening in Ayodhya, and the lamps are always just being lit, and the river always carries the small flames toward the sea. The city has said its prayers. The cattle are in, the doors are shut against the weather only. The last porch talk has gone quiet, and grandmother and grandchild sleep in one bed, under one blanket, while the story keeps watch. There is nothing more that needs telling tonight. The Sarayu flows on in the dark, saying the one thing rivers say, on and on, past the sleeping city, softly, softly, and the lamps go down, and the song goes on without us, and the night is kind, and the whole world, held in the old story's arms, sleeps.